r/AskReddit by Redmond Dts. Doctors who had to break the news. What was a reaction that stuck with you the most? I worked in an internal medicine office and had to tell a patient that his HIV test came back positive. I asked the medical assistant to come get me as soon as he was checked in for his appointment, so he would not have to wait very long for me in the exam room. I opened the door and he smiled and said, "I think I know what you're going to tell me." I nodded my head yes, and he put his arms out to be hugged. He cried and we hugged. That was in 2016. I've retired from the clinic since then. He connected with me on social media. His viral load is undetectable and has a new job that he loves. I have to give pretty bad news on a frequent basis. Most people know it's coming. My last week in residency I had to tell a mother that her daughter was going to die. She came in talking the night before and had surgery for a life-threatening problem, but we thought she would make it after. Halfway through the day her vitals and labs took a nosedive, and it was obvious that our efforts had only temporized her, but we lost. She was intubated and peaceful, but she was young and had 2 small kids. We have all seen the TV drama style screams, pounding on the table, begging for someone to do something, sobbing. When it's real it's so much harder. Her mom was crying on the floor asking me to take her organs to save her daughter. I'm not emotional, but that day wrecked me. I went to the bar after with my attending and we didn't talk. I try not to think about it. Not a doctor, but worked as a medical scribe. Basically went into rooms with the provider and listened to the story. Guy was diagnosed with very severe cancer via outpatient PET scan and told by their shitty oncologist to come to the ER, so someone else had to break the news so they could stay home. Anyway, I watched this otherwise cool provider take a 15-minute break after to go cry because the gentleman said something along the lines, "I'm so thankful you were here today to help me, and I'm so sorry that you had to be the one to tell me this today." When I was a resident and training in the pediatric ICU, I had a family whose 3 sons were in a horrible car crash. One thankfully walked away with only a broken arm, while the other 2 unfortunately were admitted for severe injuries, and I was assigned to be their primary medical provider. It became clear after a few days, one was going to make it through, but the other was not, and was officially brain dead. I remember sitting down with family to talk about next steps as they wanted to withdraw care, when mom suddenly stopped me, hugged me and said, "It's okay, we want to donate his organs before we withdraw care." The day he was born I just knew I had to name him Valentino, so he'd have a big heart, and now he can give that heart away to someone who needs it. I've never cried as hard as I did when they wheeled him to the operation room for organ procurement, and I still tear up to this day. Telling a very young patient that their cancer, which was assumed to be curable through surgery, was in fact not so, because it had spread to the brain. It was a rare cancer that rarely spreads, that rarely affects younger people. Some people get all the terrible luck in the world. The patient was remarkably stoic, but one of the parents lost it. The tears, wailing, pleading and breakdown isn't anything I'll forget. The rage against the system, the accusations I must be wrong, and then the pleading and tears again. I think it's the fact I took their hope away from them. There is no happy ending to this story, but I'm the one who had to tell them. Years later, I can still see their face and grief. It's burnt into my damn memory, and it took a while to accept that perhaps trying so hard to forget would disrespect the patient's memory. I'm trained to deliver bad news and do it regularly. This one remains one of the only times where a case utterly emotionally broke me, and my supervisor saw my reaction and sent me home and told the department I'd be off for a few days. There are always those cases that stick with you forever. C'est la vie. ER doctor. I just had a young lady die of a drug overdose. She was only 22. Her brother came as we were coding her chest compressions. We had done everything, and there was no bringing her back. I asked if he wanted to be in the room when we stopped, and he said yes. His reaction was heartbreaking. He screamed and cried, and then picked up her body and whispered in her ear, "I love you so much, you're my best friend." And just held her and kept saying, "I love you." All the staff had to take a moment after that. I've done this 8 years and that was one of the saddest, most heartbreaking things I've ever seen. I'll never forget them. First year of being a doctor, a patient had an abrupt, very unexpected code and died shortly after we had just discussed starting a new round of chemo the next day. Fully laughing and just hanging out with his family in the room not 30 minutes before he passed. It was the kind of experience that shakes you, makes you consider leaving medicine, because you do not know if you will ever trust yourself again. I lost it and spent 15 minutes ugly crying in a stairwell before I could bring myself to go to the family waiting room and tell them. But when I got there, they said they figured out what had happened. They were sad, but thanked me for at least making his last day a happy one and hugged me. I slept on the floor that night out of exhaustion. Their reaction is the only reason I was able to peel myself up in the morning and get back to work. It has been years, but I will never ever forget it or him. Just because this thread is a bummer, I'm going to tell a flip-flop story. I was with my mom when her oncologist got to tell her that her aggressive metastatic cancer with a low survival rate was responding incredibly well to treatment, and she was on road to remission. Obviously the reaction from her and I was huge. He quickly excused himself, but I could see he had tears of joy in his eyes. He had been her oncologist for almost 20 years at that point, literally watched me grow up. Amazing man, obviously cared deeply for his patients. Patient came in, 16-year-old girl, and had a rare type of childhood cancer that affects the thyroid. She managed to beat it at the time with no residual symptoms up until she came to me at 16 years old. I'm a physical therapist for her weekly exercises. She wasn't my patient, and I was just filling in as a floater for the day. She mentioned how recently she had been feeling a deep achy bone pain at night. At the same time while assessing her, I had noticed some newly founded painless lumps or nodules. Somehow this was not caught by her previous provider. After I had explained what was going on, you could instantly see the click that happened in her head. We looked at each other silently and didn't say anything, just an intense emotional silence in the air. You could see the tears really welling up. She thanked me. I sent her to her oncologist. She had stage 4 thyroid cancer. She knew she didn't have much time left. I was 26 years old at the time and scared shitless being so new in the game. It's weird. All of a sudden I knew exactly what to do, and I still think about her until this day. That memory is forever engraved in my head. Delivered news to an older patient that her liver cancer was not operable and not eligible for local regional radiation or even palliative chemotherapy because of how far gone her liver function was. There were simply no more options. Her husband was with her in the room when our team delivered the news. As soon as we said our part, the two of them just held hands, rested their heads on each other's, and they started crying. At that moment, I didn't even see them anymore. I saw myself and my wife. I barely held it together in that room. I still don't know how I made it the rest of the day without breaking down. As soon as I got home, my wife wasn't home yet, but I badly wanted to see her. I just sat and cried for a while after that. I had a young man come to the ED for pain. History of leukemia with a super high survival rate. Labs showed the cancer was back. When I went to break the news, he just smiled and said, "Oh, it's fine. God will cure me. Can I be discharged now?" No one, including his family and his spiritual leader, could convince him to stay. God did not cure him, and in fact, saw him personally a few months later. A patient of mine I hadn't seen in forever came to emerge because he couldn't manage at home. Too weak, losing weight. Blue collar guy, lots of coping with booze, smokes. I took one look at the 50-pound weight loss on him and knew. "Doc, I think I'm on the way out," he said. Not going to lie to you, I'm worried about that too, I said. Massive lung cancer had spread to the bones and liver. He died 2 weeks later. Relief. When on a palliative care service in residency, a patient who knew her cancer had come back was hospitalized due to complications. The PAL care team was consulted to discuss goals of care. The attending I was with was the first doc to sit down with her and explain that she was on her 4th line of chemo agents. Even in the best case as a first line, the meds she was on had a 30% chance of extending her survival. Hearing that let her give herself permission to not go through the misery of chemotherapy and instead emphasize time with her family. It was a very emotional visit, but she kept just thanking the PAL care doc for telling her outright what to expect. That's all folks. Thank you for watching. If you like videos like this one, why not like and subscribe for more? Have a nice evening.